It's okay. We're
All set?
hey.
Here we go.
All right.
Our guest for I'm sorry, how does this go? Season 1, episode 5 of Bobby's video Long Goodbye is Jim Leinfelder in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who I've known since the early 80s. We met in a little, pickup basketball league at the church, whose member was the Dick Clark of the Twin Cities, the ageless Dave Dahl, who should have his own Rockin' Eve.
Who has just recently retired in the past, couple of weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking
You're
maybe
right.
to specialize in fertilization full time, because he has about 12 children. So good for him. But that's how far we go back. And I just think it's awfully kind of you to help me with this, because there's so much to talk about that grazes on what you used to do. You're a full-time house husband now, are you not?
I am.
Okay. And I guess technically from a commentary standpoint, what I used to do on the radio. Before we, I have to get a sponsor taken care of before we proceed. This is Bob's Red Mill. You'll recall the African-American songstress and dancer and actress of yore, Pearl Barley.
Yeah.
And her many appearances on the Tonight Show, where her husband, Louis Belson, was the drummer. Pearl Barley. I saw this. I had to have it as a sponsor for one of the episodes. So
I remember, I think I heard the guy who started that interviewed on How I Built This on NPR.
Really?
Yeah. It was really I can understand why they featured it, because it was a really interesting story. And he was an extremely likable guy.
Bob Moore. So they interviewed him about how the company came about.
Yeah, it's this thing that it's not something I normally listen to, but I just happened to catch that, and I stayed with it. Just because he was so affable, and I liked his story and his sort of business philosophy.
Well, he has every right to be affable now, because apparently, I mean, this is a great business model, and he's making money hand over fist. Bob's Red Mill, to your good health, Bob Moore, an employee-owned company, it says here. My son works for one of those, New Belgium Brewing, out of Asheville, North Carolina, and Fort Collins, Colorado, and they like the employee-owned concept.
As do I. And co-ops were a big thing here in Minnesota. We had so many Scandinavians here and Finns, that in so many small towns, the store in town would be a co-op. Everybody would have a piece of the action, So
yeah, right.
That's what they call us commies around here.
Since the events of Wednesday, a week ago, I've been racking my brain for a precedent. Can't find one other than to say that I remember when I lived in Golden Valley, 2 doors down from the late Paul McEnroe.
Yes.
I was in his company when he got the call that there had been a horrible plane crash in Reno. That was the one where everybody but one person died.
I do.
And I'm telling you, he was out of there like a flash. Now, this was roughly 1987, or the 87 to 90 period when we lived in Golden Valley. Had January 6th happened then, and you were a part of a local news team or stringing for a network, would you have dashed out of there in order to be in the middle of the action that we saw on January 6th?
If summoned and no longer, if I weren't a parent, which I am now, I would have been out the door, but I would have been out the door with a very different frame of mind than in the past. Because having covered Trump before becoming a full-time house husband and father and distance learning teaching assistant, I probably would have headed out the door without any hesitation. But since having covered Trump and been around what led to all this, I would have been frightened.
Yeah,
definitely would have been frightened.
I don't understand why the correspondents who were sent into the middle of these things don't have either a security detail or weapons of self-defense on them. It seems to be naive not to have
Now,
something.
I can only talk about NBC because that's who I work for. But they now do have a security protocol, and they do have armed security people with them. And I remember because when I was first covering Trump's rallies and coming out into the dark, cold Iowa night, feeling completely insecure for my physical safety, I talked about that with the bureau chief because we had an armed security guard for a Black Lives Matter protest outside of the 4th precinct, not the most recent thing with having to do with George Floyd, but the previous time the police shot a black man in the street.
Right.
And that was a very different situation. They turned the street over to the protesters. There were bonfires in the middle of the street, but it was a much quieter, less dramatic situation. There was no tear gas. Anyway, but we were provided with an armed security guard who I eventually had to save from because he was mistaken for a local slumlord.
Yeah.
No, and he didn't really provide us with what I felt was much security. But I said at the time to the bureau chief, I said, I don't feel insecure about my safety at a Black Lives Matter protest.
Yeah.
But we should definitely be doing something about getting safely out of these Trump rallies.
Yeah.
And that was back when he was only running in Iowa. He wasn't the candidate yet.
Yeah. Because I'm telling you, the reason we have seen what we've seen and that I've avoided seeing because it makes me physically ill.
Yeah.
It's like somebody going through my underwear, a burglar going through my personal belongings,
And you come back.
When I'm powerless to stop it.
Yeah.
You mentioned what led to all this. I heard something, I forget on what network, on the radio on the way home from an errand today. And the guy said that if you look at it historically, these are Gingrich progeny. The parties seemed to be getting along just fine until Newt Gingrich decided he would, he would send up this trial balloon. How about we look at Democrats as demons from now on, as evil, as, people who rig elections and stuff. And now 25 years later, we have what we have.
I remember I was at a friend's wedding in Washington in 1994 thinking, well, this will be great. I'll go to a wedding and then I'll have Washington tour. Well, Washington was closed because of Newt Gingrich, because they didn't pass a budget bill. And so I couldn't go to anything. All that nonsense, started with Newt Gingrich.
And so it's no surprise that as recently as a few weeks ago, he was still making excuses for the people who were trying to, rewrite history, saying that, yes, doggone it, this has to have been fixed. We don't know how it was rigged, but we just know it was.
Yeah, it's the suspension of disbelief that the capacity for that these people have is frightening because, when you're following a cult of personality with a pathological liar, that volatile combination of, pathological credulity matched up with pathological lying. Yeah.
You mentioned your observing and reporting from the Trump rallies. How'd you like to be Katie Tur? How'd you like to be an attractive a woman totally defenseless in a situation like that?
Had that experience. We were in what I came to call the veal calf pen. When you attended Trump rallies, the media, at anyone else's rally, you could wander around and talk to people and shoot from various angles. And there were fixed positions for pool cameras, but you go wherever the people were going. At Trump rallies, you were in a fenced-in area, and on one occasion, I think it might have even been Katie. I'm trying to remember now who the correspondent was. It was a woman because there were two guys. This is before Trump had even arrived, and they were screaming, practically bursting capillaries in their faces.
Yeah,
bellowing, "You're a bitch!"
Yeah.
She was the correspondent who was oblivious. She was looking at her phone, and I was standing there, and I had my little NBC cap on. There was no mystery about who I was, what role I. And I said, "What the hell are you doing?" And they're like, "Oh, well, I said, "Where did you ever get the idea you could speak to her or me or anyone here that way?"
Yeah.
And and they said, "Oh, she was mean to Trump." And I said, "Listen, man, how would you react if I spoke to your wives that way?" To which they responded, "Our wives aren't here."
Oh, right.
And I said, I guess that accounts for all the bravado. But
Oh,
you're kind of
absolutely.
you're missing the point, boys. I said, "Get the hell out of here."
And what I was going to say a few seconds ago about your Iowa thing was, and you and I have corresponded about this by text, I would trust you to defend yourself against one person, but they're all such cowards that they have to travel in packs, in mobs, at odds that they love, like 12-1 or 100-3. That's
Absolutely.
what would concern me.
Oh yeah, you're not going to. I mean, look at those cops in Washington. I mean, they're well able to defend themselves 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 or 3-on-1. But yeah, when there's a mob around you and you're being hit from behind,
right.
And it's astonishing to me that only one gun was pulled and fired in earnest through all that.
Yeah, and I'm curious about that too, because why would I want to go toe to toe against someone flinging a fire extinguisher with me when I'm in the position of Harrison Ford in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the big Sinbad looking guy is waving the big sword, and then I realize, oh hell, I can just shoot him.
Yeah,
I shoot it. I don't understand why. What did Shoot to Kill go out with Mayor Daley? What's going on there?
I mean, when you look at all the other incidents where people have been shot in this country in the past few years, who were shot because they, were reaching for a phone, or in one case, a wallet, or a little boy, a 12-year-old boy in a park with a toy gun. The list goes on far too long, of course. But they were summarily shot.
Yeah.
And these guys, mostly guys, were doing all these malevolent things. And I'm astonished. I guess maybe there were so many that even shooting wouldn't get the job done.
There's one anecdote, where one of the first they subdued, there were howls of the anarchists around him shouting, "Kill him with his own gun."
Yes.
Have you seen that?
Yes, I did.
There, in my world, that doesn't exist, because you're already dead. When you get past, the checkpoint or whatever it is, and you become a trespasser, and you begin to defile statues or what have you, or with your Confederate flag, I'm sorry, you're going down.
Well, I mean, imagine someone trying to do that at Buckingham Palace in London.
Yeah.
They would be shot with an automatic weapon that is carried by those soldiers, those ceremonial looking soldiers, but they are armed with state-of-the-art, automatic weapons, and they would shoot you extremely dead.
Yeah.
Something doesn't add up about it, and it's being looked at, and I hope we find out.
I think it was the day after somebody asked me how I felt, or I was maybe too forthcoming in a comment section of a major newspaper's website, but I said, I have come too far in this life. I have worked too hard to better myself and raise a family in order to turn the rest of my life over to a guy in bull horns and face paint, in buffalo horns and face paint. I'm sorry. I'm just not. I'm not gonna.
And people showing up with the zip cuffs, the temporary plastic cuffs on their hip.
Yep.
I mean, who does that? I mean, there's only one thing you do with those, and that's render somebody helpless.
Yeah.
Presumably that was for members of the House and Senate.
Yeah.
The gallows erected, not a miniature. We're not talking the Stonehenge replica from Spinal Tap.
Right.
This was a full-size working gallows. Erected. What?
Yeah, I think the choreography and the planned execution part of it will probably let Trump off the hook, because there was one particular representative from Arizona who the
Yeah.
day before was leading unauthorized tours and showing these
Yeah.
so-and-sos where everybody's offices were. Okay. So.
Yeah. I think more is going to come out on that too. I have to say, it's been a long time since I've been to the U.S. Capitol, but I have to believe it bristles with CCTV cameras. I
Yeah.
find it hard to believe that on the 5th, whenever these tours took place, that is not captured somewhere
Yeah.
on digital video.
See, for us to be able to get Trump on the spontaneous egging on of these unstable personalities, they have to be, motivated to go do this. When, as it turns out, this had been planned for months, and that's what will oddly
they're
enough.
using the guy you referenced with the horns. He's using as his defense, and his lawyer is using as his defense. We were there at the behest of the president. Excuse me, but we were asked to come and do this by Mr. Trump. So
what do they want? A pardon.
They want a pardon.
You can't write it. That's what's frustrating. You wrote stuff, I've written stuff, and it's really frustrating when real events, current events in real time, totally frustrate the fiction people.
I always think of, Patty Chayefsky and Network.
Yep.
And how everything he wrote in there, which seemed outlandish at the time, is, it was a black comedy at the time. And now it's a quaint documentary. What would he be thinking now if he were at home, trying to write some, dystopian, a teleplay, and he turns on cable and realizes he's been scooped. Oh, when Tom Wolfe wrote his first work of fiction, what was that called? Oh, Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yeah.
He went around the country, and I heard him talk at the Guthrie, and he talked about how someone asked him, what's harder about writing fiction than your nonfiction, which is, wonderful and celebrated. And he said, the hard thing about it is being scooped by reality on an almost daily basis.
It's true. And Network has so many little jets of relevance connected to this thing, like Ned Beatty, who gave Peter Finch the big pep talk about the role of corporations in our lives. Ned Beatty's company would have already abandoned Trump by now.
Exactly. You have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr.
Yeah.
And then the TV show with the terrorists.
Because I think that a lot of this, a lot of the underpinnings of Trump's popularity came from TV, from The Apprentice. 11 years this man came into your home.
Yes.
And there's a line in Network where he says, of course I trust you. You're on TV, buddy.
Exactly.
He says,
why should I listen to you? Or why are you listening to me? Yeah. And he says, because you're on television, dummy.
I don't know what your experience is with Nora at the movies or movies on TV, but my children thought that if it was on a screen, it had legitimacy.
Yes.
And this died when Kevin took them to Evita, but it was bound to happen. It was bound to happen. They were so bored stiff by this movie where everybody was singing, their dialogue. But up to Evita, if it was on a screen, whether it was Dick Tracy, let's say, the Warren Beatty Dick Tracy, or any of the Fievel Goes West, or any of that crap, that it had legitimacy. And I think that's what these really basic people out in the boonies, that's how the bond formed to me. That the guy who came into their home for 11 years, he would never lead them astray.
No, because he's a straight shooter. He gives it, he tells Meatloaf what he needs to hear.
He says what I think.
Yeah.
Really?
Out loud.
You've got a dirty mind then, man.
Without consequence.
I don't know if you're able to dabble in anything professional in your spare time or on your house husbanding duties, but I'm helping a friend adapt her novel to a screenplay. And one of the scenes opens with an establishing shot of a Norman Rockwell type image. Dads with lunch pails walking along white picket fences to work, and sprays of sprinklers and paper boys on bicycles. And, you know, I look at that setup for that scene and I'm thinking, that stuff's over.
Yeah.
You know, it'll never be back, because in one of those houses is some mouth-breathing mountain man wearing a T-shirt that says Camp Auschwitz.
And this is what I don't get, is because they seem like they want to get back to that, what you just limited so well.
Yeah.
And yet they seem to not represent that at all.
Right.
You know, so like you seem to aspire to that Leave It to Beaver kind of world, but you guys are at best what Eddie Haskell might have turned out to be, you know, in his later years after.
Well, let's face it, the connective tissue to the whole thing is race.
Yes.
It's all about race.
It is. There's a scene in the movie Mississippi Burning. Remember that with
Denzel?
This is with
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman is the sort of good old boy FBI agent who's seen it all down south, and then the other great actor whose name I can't come up with. He's the sort of more Ivy League Robert Kennedy, kind of guy. And Gene Hackman tells him a story about when he was a kid. There was a black sharecropper down the road who done well, and he even saved up enough money to get himself a mule, which meant he could farm more acres. He could rent more acreage and make more money. And then one day that mule turned up dead, it poisoned. And I looked at my daddy, and he looked at me, and I knew my dad had killed that mule. And my daddy looked at me, he knew I knew. And he said to me, he said, "Boy, if you ain't better than a nigger, then what are you?"
Yeah.
And that is what it boils down to in their mind.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is all about white supremacy.
Yeah.
And anti-Semitism and all of the little, tentacles of hatred.
That was the only balm on their tortured souls, was that, well, I'm still white. The old, people would say with a straight face, "Well, that's mighty white of you."
Yeah, right.
I remember going to a Trump rally in, I can't remember the town, right across from Omaha, Council Bluffs.
Okay.
And as I was coming from the, snowy, packed snow parking lot, among the many cars I saw, there was a pickup truck. Back when mini pickups were actually mini, they were small. So it was an older Toyota. And in the window, in lettering that you would buy at the checkout stand at a truck stop, these little adhesive letters that you could buy and stick them on your window.
Yeah.
It said, "Somebody and Sons snow shoveling," not snow removal. And this certainly wasn't big enough for a plow anyway. But and I thought, there you have it, man. That's what this guy's got going here in Council Bluffs and his sons. They're shoveling snow. Yeah. They're not pushing it even with a pickup. So, they can't do a lot of walks or driveways.
How the lower middle class
and
people with barns in Rochester, Minnesota, that you can see the roofs from Highway 52 and it says Trump on the barn roof.
Yeah.
How they could form a bond with someone claiming to be a multi-billionaire is beyond me. Somebody
who's, pooping into a gold toilet and living in a gym crack penthouse of, I don't get it. I mean, I just don't get it. It's a strange kind of populism.
It's a mystery, but I'm glad that there's going to be some sort of order in which humane, sane people will be in charge. And effective January 20th, I won't have to think about my government at any point on any day.
Yeah. I mean, right. Because for 4 years now, we've been getting up in the morning. It's like when you had a newborn and you just had to constantly check on it. Now we have an older child who, you just count on the fact they're going to get up in the morning and have some cereal, and there's less drama.
The state version of this, the statewide Minnesota version of this, I think, in the first year or two of it was Ventura, which I think prepared me for Trump. And then with 9/11, if I turned on the TV and I saw commercials, that meant everything is okay. That meant things are returning to normal, right?
Yeah, right. Commerce.
Otherwise, how many calamities are you and I going to live through? We're going to either observe or be a part of, or know people who were a part of it, you know?
Yeah, I was in New York for just after 9/11 because I was helping a guy move back to New York.
Mm-hmm.
So we're driving into town in a big Ryder rental truck. I'd never felt so conspicuous driving over the Verrazano Bridge in my life. And so I was there for a while. And so I was down at, ground zero. And
Yeah.
It was surreal.
Yeah.
And now, but I felt safe. If
Yeah.
I was going to go to Washington now and go check out the scene there, I don't know that I would, because I wouldn't feel safe. And I'm also not particularly comforted by 20,000 weekend warriors there, because we've seen that so many of these people down at the Capitol were from law enforcement, firefighters,
yeah,
and then, regular armed forces.
yeah, Olympic swimmers.
Right. So, where do we look for reassurance?
It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the pod people. They're walking among us, and they're not
exactly.
They're not clearly marked.
Right. Is there like something at the back of their head I need to check for? There was some movie where that was the tell. But
right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're awaiting the resolution of that calamity, and hopefully, as the Senate trial takes place, there'll be some closure somewhere on the other side of that. But let's go back to the calamity. Would you say that the big calamity that you covered was Mississippi River Bridge collapse?
Yeah, I mean it's certainly a vivid memory. It's something you never expect, right? The complete and total failure of a significant piece of infrastructure. I remember that day I was at. Remember, I used to play the Irish sport of hurling.
Yeah.
I was at hurling practice, and I chased a ball over near my stuff at just the moment the phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was the New York desk. Usually I get called by the Chicago desk. It was the New York desk, and they said, "Have you been hired?" I said, "No." And they said, "Get to the 35W bridge right now." And that was kind of it. They said it collapsed. And I remember, and I left like in my practice togs, I had cleats on, and luckily I had my ID in the car because I looked ridiculous. And I did as they instructed, and I drove like a bat out of hell. And I got there while the 10th Avenue Bridge was still open. They hadn't closed that off yet. And I ran out onto it in my spikes, and I looked over the side. I was thinking like a section maybe fell out, because I can remember when bridges have failed in other states where like a big concrete section will just drop out.
Yeah.
And then when I saw that twisted mass of metal and slabs and cars nose down into the water, my brain double clutched. What am I? What? The whole bridge went down? What?
Right.
And then I got swept off the bridge by the cops.
Right.
And I remember, because I was like one of my greatest gets, as they say in the business, for guests. This was for the Today Show. I remember I had to run all the way down by the riverfront area and over the Stone Arch Bridge, and then back to the Red Cross building on the other side of the river, which was at that time like a headquarters for emergency services. And I spotted this guy. There was on the other side of the bridge that was, at a 45-degree angle down into the water, there was a school bus adhering to the surface still. And the door was open, the kids were off. And I looked across the rope, and I saw this guy in a cut under his lip, bleeding pretty good. And I said, "Hey," I said, "were you on the bridge?" Well, to cut to the chase, he saved those. He was on the bus with those little kids, and he saved him. He got him off that bus.
Yeah.
And got him saved. So I booked him as a guest. I got him, and I told him, he told me a little bit about his life, and not much going on. And he was going to be at the technical school, but he ran out of money. I said, "Listen to me, man. When you do your interview tomorrow morning, you work into the conversation that you had to quit school because you didn't have money."
Absolutely.
I said, "You're, for today and today only, sir, you are a hero, tomorrow you're
Heroism should have its benefits. That's for sure.
the same guy. I said, so work it in. You need some help. I
I
even know
agree.
if he did. I don't even know if
I
he
was
did.
at the Hungry Mind. You remember the Hungry Mind bookstore on
Oh, yeah.
McAllister campus? And I was there when they
Yeah.
told us at the cash register that the bridge had collapsed, and we ran home to see the coverage. And 155 vehicles lost, only 13 died. And so, what does that make in your parlance to Brian? No, it was to Oberman.
As I told Keith Olbermann,
on MSNBC. What did you call it?
A grim miracle.
It was a grim miracle. That's exactly right.
It really was. You know, if it hadn't have been construction on the bridge, which slowed the pace of traffic, oh, I don't even want to think about it. You know, because the cars would have been streaming over the bridge.
Yeah.
In this case, they were traveling at a pretty slow rate of speed. That's the only reason it was so.
Do you think Pauletti's replacement bridge went up too fast? Do you remember that controversy?
Yeah. Well, it's been so far a successful light show.
Holding up.
Yeah, and they could turn it different colors. They turned it purple when it first died.
Right.
And I think when they passed something to do with gay marriage, they turned it rainbow colors. And so it's kind of a cool bridge in that sense. It's not architecturally all that interesting. I wrote a piece actually for Minneapolis St. Paul about how we could have had Calatrava, this famous, sculptor / architect, and he designed a lot of signature bridges all around the world.
Yeah.
Could have had Calatrava design that bridge.
Right.
It probably would have taken longer to get it up. And really where it's situated, it doesn't present itself all that much. You can hardly even tell you're going over a bridge when you go over it. So probably didn't need the Calatrava touch. But
so between the campaign trail, the Calamity Beat, stubbing for me at KSTP,
those are the days.
Your work at KSTP TV when Kevin and I first moved to the area,
right on the desk,
and your cable show. Which of those, or maybe there was something else I don't know about, was your most enjoyable media task?
Oh, well, the one that got me onto your show when I was a writer, when I wrote for the Twin Cities Reader. That was my favorite job.
Really?
Yeah, because you got to write, cover pieces it always made me feel good to walk. And it didn't happen all the time, but when I would have a cover piece and, the reader was free and something people would pick up to kill time while they're waiting for their lunch date or something, I'd walk into some place and I'd see people reading the piece, and even more rarely, maybe even talking about it. And that always, I really felt a sense of accomplishment. Like, hey, this is connecting with people. People are actually reading this,
I was always given a lot of freedom in selection of subject matter. Was Adam Platt our boss? I just remember him being involved with the reader in some way.
Well, he was our boss at the, or he was my boss at the Minneapolis St. Paul magazine. He was an editor there. Now he's with the Business Journal. He was at the reader. Maybe eventually, maybe after I was gone, he might have been, before Dave Carr took over as editor.
Yeah.
I was out in Portland then. I wish I'd been here when Carr was the editor, because the opening was there for me to work at the reader, because David, the late David Carr of the New York Times, he had gone across the hallway to Corporate Report, which, and I remember thinking, I can't think of a less likely persona.
Yeah. And then to DC for the City Pages there. DC had a kind of City Pages publication that he worked for.
Yes. And one of the guys who worked for him as a writer was one of the progenitors of the cable show I did, Neat Stuff.
Okay, nice segue. Yeah, because I was going to ask
Dave
you,
Nuttycombe was the guy.
Do episodes of Neat Stuff exist online?
I don't think they do. Some people have found them in like a weird, obscure archival things, but no, strangely not. I don't know why, but it's never.
Everything else is. Everything else is out there.
Right, and the people who like it really love it a lot. I talked, a friend of mine who works for the World Bank back when he'd be traveling the world on like Arab Emirates and things like, airlines like that. Neat stuff would pop up. Actually, I think it was on British Airways. Neat stuff, which makes sense to me. It's kind of a British sort of a show. But no, and now it's almost like it's been disappeared. I feel like Garrison Keillor.
Well, no, there's an example of the passage of time. There's no Garrison Keillor anymore, and there's no City Pages, and there's no Reader. It's all gone. I feel like Jim McKay after the Olympic shootings. They're all gone. The way his head was rolling around.
It's true. I mean, the whole alternative magazine or alternative newspaper scene, it gave rise to so many good writers.
Right.
But
William Souter.
People do.
Does the name William Souter ring a bell? He's become quite the prominent book author.
Yes, he's a friend of mine. He's married to an even older friend of mine from high school. Yeah, he's got a much celebrated new biography out now on Steinbeck. So that's getting.
Oh, that's right. It's a Steinbeck bio, isn't it?
Yeah. So he's been very successful with. He was a Pulitzer contender for his book on Audubon.
Yes.
So, he's a really good writer. I liked a quote he gave, in fact, to a reviewer who said, like, do we really need another book on Steinbeck? I think was essentially the question, or what does your book offer that other books don't? And he said, well, it's the way I write them. And I would agree with that. He's such a good writer that I will till earth I've already read, through over again because Bill's such a delightful writer. Yeah. So, yeah,
listen. I just if a person doesn't physically threaten me now, I'm just so quietly grateful because there's just so much friction that could break out at any moment in any kind of situation. In LA here, we have Trumpers who travel in like, let's say, a dozen, and they will do a flash mob kind of thing where they breathe on you. They want to give you COVID. Yeah, they want to make a point about the mask-free freedom lifestyle, And so when I go out, if someone is nice to me, civil, or ignores me, I'm grateful. So a lot has changed.
I've only been accosted once on the whole mask thing, and it was probably way back in April. I was in a holiday station in Mendota. I think it's still, I was in Mendota, right by the 35E bridge. And I put on a mask. I was just getting gas, but then Nora decided she needed strawberry milk and some Skittles. So I went inside to get those. And I dutifully put on my mask when it wasn't, I didn't even know if it was mandatory, but I didn't want to be a jerk. Anyway, a guy 2 kind of aisles away from me says, what are you scared? And I had to double click. I thought, what is he? He's talking about my mask.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said,
isn't that crazy? Isn't it just nutty? And yet, in a way, I'm glad for COVID because it means that I don't wind up sitting in a movie theater next to a guy in face paint and buffalo horn.
I know what's going to make it harder to be social again. Fear of COVID?
Yeah, right.
Or our fellow Americans.
That's the truth. Hey, listen, the next time we do this, make sure Nora is in the same room again because he just kind of cleaned up my language, for half an hour. So it was really kind of refreshing.
Did you hear that, Nora? Bob thanks you for being a sort of a filter for him in the room.
Thanks to both of you. Let's do this again soon. Maybe when I visit in April for the arrival of the next member of my family.
Yeah. I would love it.
Nice to meet you, Nora. You guys have a great weekend. Hey. Thanks for being on the show, Lonnie.
Thanks, Bob. Be well.
Bye.
Careful out there.
Bye-bye.